Hello, thank you for joining tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about Romans 12. It's a good little conclusion to what we've been talking about in the Sermon on the Mount, but I just hung up the phone with a good pastor friend of mine, and we were talking about just the level of turmoil that's out there all around us, even in Florence, even in Darlington, in the PD right now. There's just this level of turmoil. Marty Massey reminded me this morning that if we keep our eyes focused on Jesus, even in the storm, we'll be, that Peter was okay walking on water until he took his eyes off Jesus. That was a good thought. So Romans 12, I want you, and we've talked about especially the first two verses many, many times in my time at Ebenezer, but I want to go a little beyond that. Romans 12, beginning in verse 1, Paul wrote, "Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship." So, the first thing he said was that our spiritual act of worship is to live our lives in a way that is acceptable to God, as if it were a holy sacrifice to God. And then in verse 2, he told us how to do that. "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may be able to prove what the will of God is, which is good and acceptable and perfect." So if we're living our lives following Christ, keeping our eyes focused on Christ, and we're not being conformed to the world, but we're being transformed, allowing our minds to be renewed by Christ, he's going to reveal God's will to us. Now, those are great words. Verse 3, Paul said, "For through the grace given to me, I say to every one among you, not to think more highly of himself than he ought to think, but to think so as to have sound judgment, as God has allotted to each a measure of faith." Now that's an interesting thought, because what he just said was don't even allow your Christendom to make you think that you're better than anyone or more highly than you ought to think. He's not saying that we ought to think lowly of ourselves. I think though it's a call to humility. Paul said in verse 4, "For just as we have many members in one body, and all the members do not have the same function, so we who are many are one body in Christ, and individually members one of another. Since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, each of us is to exercise them accordingly. If prophecy, according to the proportion of his faith, If service, in his serving, or he who teaches in his teaching, or he who exhorts in his exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good." So what Paul just said is this: if we're going to be disciples, if we're going to follow Christ, then we're going to understand that my gift may be different from someone else's gift, and that's okay. And then my job is to focus on my gift and do my gift as well as I can do it. And then help my brother if I can, but allow my brother to use his gift and do his job. And if I'm doing my job and he's doing his job, and this one's doing their job, and Melinda's doing her job, and Heidi's doing her job, and Marcia's doing her job, and Nathan's doing his job, and Andy's doing her job, and Matthew's doing his job. If we allow God to stir all of that and to conduct all of that into a wonderful orchestra, beautiful music will be made by him, and it's his music, not our music. We need to recognize who we are, recognize who God is, and follow him. Hope you have a great night.